few more seconds.
Not a problem.
Yes, sir, please continue.
Yeah. First of all, thank you. Hope I make some justice at the end of the day or the end of the presentation. For everyone, you can't escape without examining the year. So, as an undergraduate uh, training program, you would definitely have to know about examination of a year. And hope you all guys must be knowing a year case will be definitely part of your theory as well as your practical exams. In practical exam, yes, you will have three cases and depends upon the universities. So you'll have three cases. One definitely will be ear, one definitely will be the nose, and one definitely will be the throat. So you can't escape any university examination without an ear case. So I'm not going to the high level or anything. Let us know about what you mean by a basic examination of the year and what is the important things which you are not supposed to miss in an examination of the year, particularly when it comes to your university exams, as well as if you're going to be practicing also, you should know what are things you're trying to see when there's a patient who comes to you with a ear. So we'll go to the next slide. So I'll be touching on all these aspects. So basically in examination of pinna and particularly in the preauricular or a postauricular region, and then examination of ear canal. Most important is the examination of the tympanic membrane, and then a few tests about tuning fork tests, facial nerve, and test for giddiness. So the last 4, 5, 6 is going to be basically about as a completion of your examination and few tests. But the first thing is important. You can't straight away skip into any whether it's going to be a long case or it's going to be a short case. You can't skip any of these three things. You must go in order as well as you must have examined all these three systems. Let us go to the first one. That's about examination of the pinna. So what are the things you want to look? So basically in the examination of the year, the first thing you are trying to see is an examination of the pinna. So pinna varies from person to person. It can have a change in the size, shape, or position. So what are things you want to look into the pinna? Whether you have some kind of an abnormalities of the pinna, or it can be an trauma-induced changes in the shape, or is there any positional variations in the pinna? Any idea what is the function of the pinna? Any guess?
It's a
Do
collection
I
of
have
sound.
an interactive session? Do you have an interactive session, or is this only one way?
So anyone is interested, they can answer, sir. No worries.
Okay, okay. Basically, it gets all the sound and then it passes into your ear canal. So yes, pinna is definitely having a function other than pulling the pinna for punishment. Yes, you have the collection of a sound and it navigates to the external auditory canal. So what are things which you like to see in the pinna? You try to see is there any kind of a swelling. Same way, when you try to see in front of the pinna and post of the pinna. So there are certain things which you are not definitely supposed to miss. Whether is there any kind of a sinus or a fistula or a scar or a tenderness or any kind of an edema in the pre and the post auricular region. Next slide, please. So what are the things, as I said before, the pinna. So let us go to the size of the pinna. So what do you mean by an absence of pinna? What is the term called? It's called anorexia. Sometimes you can have a big one, which is called the macrotia or a bad tear. So these are things which you're trying to look in the pinna. So you have the size and then you have the position, whether is there any kind of a loss of pinna or any kind of an abnormalities in the pinna. That is what you're trying to look. So as I said, the size can be based on the it can be an anosia or a macrotia or a microtia, or sometimes you can have a lower position, particularly in case of a Down syndrome. And sometimes you can have an abnormalities in the shape because of a repeated trauma or a post-surgery. Somebody is having a history of trauma, that might be a kind of a deformed pinna, which can have an abnormalities in the shape. And simultaneously, you check in for any kind of a radial tenderness also. Next one. Next slide, please. So these are certain features where you can see abnormalities in the pinna. Like a boxes here, that's going to be post-trauma. You can have some kind of a swelling or an abnormality, or sometimes you can have a preauricular tags, or you can have a bad tear. And as I said, anosia when you have an absence of pinna at all. Okay. And in the preauricular region, what are things you want to look in for? So as I said, you can have a swelling, or you can have a fistula, or you can have a scar. So what are the things which you like to see because of the preauricular region? In the preauricular region, if you see a small opening in front of the ear, it is called a preauricular sinus. This is almost congenital one. And sometimes when it gets infected, you can have a infected preauricular sinus, which you may have to surgically remove it. So that is what you're trying to see in a preauricular region. And in case there is any swelling in the preauricular region, it might be because of a parotid swelling, or it might be because of any kind of a lymph node. So these are the common causes for a swelling in the preauricular region. A scar, if you find a scar, maybe any surgical scar because of the parotid surgery, or maybe previous sinus excision scar, or you can have something called a end oral incision. End oral incision. Any idea what is the name of the end oral incision? Any guess?
So I'm not sure, but is it Weil's incision?
Weil's incision is a post-auricular incision. That is the common incision which we give for surgeries in a routine ear surgery or a tympanoplasty mastoid. But sometimes we do something called as an end oral incision. The name for an end oral incision is called Lempert. So these are things which you are trying to look in for. Yeah, Susan, you're right. So you can have a incision which is for a parotid surgery. You can have a scar there, or maybe for a fistula excision you can have a scar, or you can looking for a Lempert incision, that is called as an end oral incision. Next slide. So these are things which we already discussed. So we are trying to see in the swellings, maybe due to any kind of a cyst, or commonly things is the lymph node, preauricular lymph node hypertrophy, or maybe a parotid swelling, or maybe a scar, as I said, maybe due to an incision because of any parotid surgery, or maybe end oral incision. So what are things simultaneously? What are things you are looking into the post-auricular region? Same, you can have a post-auricular swelling. It might be because of any mastoid abscess, because the post-auricular area is related to the mastoid. So you can have a mastoid abscess, or same way you can have a swelling in the post-auricular region because of any lymph node hypertrophy also. And any scar, that's what your colleague also said. The post-auricular swelling is most probably you have a post-auricular incision because of the tympanoplasty surgeries or mastoid surgery. It is called the William Weil or modified William Weil surgery. Same as that of your post-auricular, preauricular swelling or the sinus, you can have a fistula in the post-auricular region. That is nothing but a mastoid fistula. Mastoid fistula is nothing but a communication or opening from the skin to the mastoid. It is commonly seen in case of any complications of a CSOM. And then the commonest thing which you are trying to look in the post-auricular region is a post-auricular or post-aural tenderness. The sign is called Grisinger's sign. Grisinger's sign is nothing but a pitting edema due to the mastoid emissary vein thrombosis. So what is the condition related to mastoid emissary vein thrombosis? Any guess? So it can be a complication of a lateral sinus thrombosis. Okay, lateral sinus thrombosis. Sometimes you can have an infection of the mastoid emissary vein causing a pitting edema, that is called the Grissinger's sign. So you have examined the pinna shape, size, everything was perfectly normal, or you find any kind of an abnormalities. Sometimes you can have an abnormal because of the repeated trauma to the pinna. So it's always called as a cauliflower ear. You can have the whole pinna abnormal. So this is what you're trying to looking for. Then you're looking for a pre-auricular region, sinus swelling, scar. Same way, the post-auricular region, any sinus swelling or a scar. So these are things which you try to tell you. So when you start with an examination in your ear case, you always have to make sure that you start all these things. So examination of the pinna, examination of the pre-auricular region, and then comes your post-auricular region. Then we go to the next one. Next slide, please. So this is a small video where you try to see if you find any kind of a scar or any kind of an abnormality in the pre-auricular region or a post-auricular region. Okay. Next slide. Then you have the important test, that is your 3-finger test. So what is this 3-finger test? 3-finger test is you use the index, thumb, and the middle finger, and you see for a tenderness in these 3 areas. So the index finger is kept over the mastoid tip, and middle finger is kept over the mastoid emissary vein, and the last one is the ring finger over the Simba concha. Okay, so basically you are placing the 3 fingers in 3 areas. One is at the mastoid tip, one is at the posterior border of the mastoid, and the other one is at the level of the Simba concha. So we have a video in the next one. Based on that, I will tell you. Video, please. So you have these 3 fingers. You see the 3 fingers. One is the Simba concha. The other one is the posterior border of the mastoid and the mastoid tip. Okay, Simba concha, posterior border of the mastoid, and the mastoid tip. So what is the significance of these 3 fingers? Your Simba concha corresponds to your mastoid antrum, and your posterior border of mastoid corresponds to your mastoid emissary vein, and the tip one is for the tip cells. So when you have a tenderness at these 3 points, that means the patient is having a mastoiditis, or it is probably a complication of a CSOI. So when you give a pressure at the Simba concha, that's what the first finger, it corresponds to your mastoid antrum, and then patient will have a tenderness. And the second finger, as you've seen in this video, it corresponds to your posterior border of mastoid. That again corresponds to your mastoid emissary vein. That is in relation to your sigmoid sinus thrombosis or the lateral sinus thrombosis. And the tip one, if you have a tenderness, that means you have an active infection in your mastoid tip. So once you have finished these 3, then you come to your 3-finger test. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Then you have the fistula test. So fistula test is nothing but you give a pressure in the external auditory canal and try to see if there is any kind of a nystagmus or a giddiness. So how do you do this? Either you can give an intermittent pressure over the tragus, or there is something called a Siegel's pneumatic oral speculum. Hope you guys would have seen during your clinical postings the Siegel's pneumatic speculum. But this Siegel's pneumatic speculum, I mean, most of the times is done in olden days. Nowadays, you have an otoscope with a kind of an inflating air bulb winners. So nowadays, we don't use it regularly as a Siegel speculum, but maybe part of your examination, the examiner might ask you, or it can be kept in the afternoon session as a instruments also. So to start with, for your level, when you're trying to examine, you can just do a simple intermittent pressure over the tragus and see for the nystagmus from the patient. If the patient is having giddiness, then you call as fistula time. Fistula test is positive. The other method is you can also use a Siegel's pneumatic oral speculum. I think we have a video for that one also. Where you place the Siegels, you can put the video, Ashwin. Here you can see you have an intermittent pressure over the tragus and to see for any kind of a giddiness. As I said, the other one, if your instrument is not given to you, you can also it's okay. Go back. We can show them later on also. We'll show the Siegel speculum later on also. It's not a problem. So one is, as I said, for you guys, normally in a university examination, they can ask you any other method to see for the fistula test. In that case, you can always, what to say, in the sense of say that I can use a Siegel's pneumatic speculum and then to see for the fistula test for the giddiness. Fine. So once you give a pressure, there will be stimulation of your inner ear. And the commonest question is they're going to ask you which canal is the commonest cause for the fistulas. So in this fistula test, the commonest semicircular canal is going to be lateral semicircular. That is the thing which is closest to your, what to say, your eardrum. So you stimulate the lateral semicircular canal, and once you have a stimulation because of the pressure, you can have a giddiness. That is called a fistula test. So in the exam, as I said, in the exam, you can just have to do an intermittent pressure to say, I did an intermittent pressure over the tragus to see for giddiness. In case they ask you any other methodology to do it, you can also say using a Siegel's pneumatic speculum, or nowadays we use the otoscope with the inflatable bulb in it, where you connect and you can also increase the pressure. Next one. So when you have
a test is intermittent pressure over the tragus to check for nystagmus in the patients. Patients with labyrinthine fistula and labyrinthitis will show nystagmus. The other way to do.
So when do you have an fistula, but still it is going to be, or the patient says that he doesn't have any kind of nystagmus or giddiness. So sometimes you can have something called a false negative test. So patient is having a fistula, but still you don't report it or you don't see any kind of a giddiness. That is commonly seen in case of any dead labyrinth, because the labyrinth itself is not functioning. The other one is if in case of an articuloantral disease where the destruction has happened on the fistula, but the hole is sealed by the choristotoma, there won't be any kind of a stimulation. Okay, so this is where fistula is there, but the patient will not have any kind of nystagmus. But as on the other time, when you don't have a fistula, but you have a giddiness, it is commonly seen in case of a congenital syphilis, otherwise called as the Henneberg sign. Maybe part of your MCQ, they might ask you all these things. So in case of a dead labyrinth, you will not have any kind of a giddiness, and you have a giddiness in spite of not having any fistula. Let's go to the next one. So once you have finished everything externally, so you have examined the pinna, you have examined the preauricular region, you have examined the postauricular region, then you have finished your 3-finger test or a tragal tenderness, and then you go in to the inner ear. Any idea when do you have a tragal tenderness positive? When you give a pressure over the tragus, sometimes people will jump with the pain. So what is it? What may be the condition due to? So it might be seen in a otitis externa or an inflammation of the external auditory canal. So what are things you want to see in the external auditory canal? So external auditory canal, unless it's a kid, normally it is not a straight one. You have a curvature. So for making it straight to examine, most of the times if you see, when you want to examine the ear, you try to pull the pinna backwards and outwards so that you make the ear canal straight, and then you try to look in. Otherwise, most of the time you will see, when you don't do this, you will straight away see the ear canal, but you will not be able to see the eardrum. So what are the things you want to look into the ear canal? As you all know, the outer is formed by the cartilage and the deeper part is formed by the bony ear canal. So always the ear canal is formed by two areas. One is the cartilage and the other one is the bony one. So length is about 24 millimeter, and you have the outer cartilage which is 8, and the inner one is made of the bony canal which is about 16 mm. So what are things you want to look in ear canal? Ear canal, you can see an otitis externa, that's inflammation. Are you seeing any kind of a discharge or a pus? Is there any sagging of the ear canal, or you see any wax, foreign body, granulation, and naturally furuncle or an osteotoma? So these are the things which you're trying to look in an external auditory canal. Next one. So if you don't see any kind of ear canal itself, then probably you think it might be due to congenital or maybe traumatic. If there's a trauma induced, you might not have a ear canal itself, or maybe congenital. So that's called the stenosis of the ear canal. Other than that, you normally see is there any kind of wax. So wax is normally seen in the anterior most part of the ear canal, that is in the cartilaginous portion of the ear canal, or sometimes you might be having a collection of pus in the ear canal because of any kind of a CSOM. In these cases, you have to clean it up to see or comment on the tympanic membrane. So most of the time when I've seen that people presenting in a case, so they used to say that external canal is filled with pus. Then they comment on the tympanic membrane. Or external canal is, I could see wax, sir, on the tympanic membrane, there's a perforation. That is what you're not supposed to say. So whenever you're trying to examine for a university exams, when you're going to comment on the tympanic membrane, you always have to say, there was a minimal wax, I cleaned it up with the probe, and then I could see the tympanic membrane. Same way, if there's a pus, I mopped up the pus, and then you have to talk about the tympanic membrane. Don't say there's a pus and then talk about the ear canal or the tympanic membrane. So if the ear canal is not wide, you might have to require another instrument that is called a ear speculum. So use a sterile ear speculum and keep it in position so that you avoid this curvature of the ear canal and then directly look into the tympanic membrane. Okay, go to the next one. So this is by direct visualization. In case you, I think you can go to the next slide. So this is how you try to use a ear speculum to examine the ear canal. So this you always have to use a sterile ear speculum. Pull the pin up backwards so that you try to make the ear canal straight, and then put it in the ear canal and try to avoid anything in the ear canal and directly try to look into the tympanic membrane. So always try to see if you can use a proper size of an ear speculum. This is always better so that you can avoid any kind of in the sense of you can see the whole tympanic membrane correctly. If you use a smaller ear speculum, you might be seeing one quadrant or one part of the tympanic membrane. So always to have a preferred size so that you completely see the ear canal. So how do you prefer the ear sizes? I mean, it varies. There are various sizes. So based on the ear canal, you fit it in, and once you fit it in, you should be able to see the entire tympanic membrane. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, this is again how you examine the ear canal using a sterile ear speculum. Nowadays, when you have an otoscope and all these things, you can use an otoscope to examine all these things, but you should be able to demonstrate, or you should be able to see when you don't have an otoscope, you can use a sterile ear speculum. Next slide, please. So once you have examined the ear canal in complete, then we go for the examination of the tympanic membrane. This is a little more, the most important part is what you're going to talk about is the examination of the tympanic membrane, which is coming to a concern about a CSOM case. So before we go into the tympanic membrane, as I said, if there's a wax, you have to definitely use a Jobson horn probe and clean up the ear canal. Or if there's a pus, you just mop it up and then comment on the thing. So what are the other things which you like to see in a ear canal is, as I said, can be a swelling in the external cartilaginous portion of the ear canal. That is nothing but a furuncle. Are you seeing any kind of a furuncle? Sometimes there may be bulging of the whole external auditory canal itself. This is a condition where you have the bone part and the cartilage part of the ear canal completely destroyed, and the mastoid abscess is almost pushing the skin of the external canal, and you may not be able to see the tympanic membrane. Okay, there is something called as a sagging of the posterior canal wall. So sometimes you might have a mastoid abscess which has destroyed the posterior canal wall completely, and you can see the whole of the posterior canal wall bulging into the external auditory meatus, where you might not be able to see. So if they ask you what are the causes for a swelling in the external auditory canal, it might be a stenosis, it might be a furuncle, it might be a otitis externa, or a mastoid abscess causing a sagging of the posterior canal wall. Anterior canal wall, most commonly due to any kind of destruction or infection, and sometimes when you have a temporomandibular joint malformations, you can have the bone coming in and blocking the external auditory canal. And sometimes osteomas. Osteoma is nothing but tumors of the bone which can have a swelling in the external auditory canal. So when it comes to external auditory canal, just like how you talked about everything about, you should have all these things in mind. But when you're trying to present a case during examination, you can always say that the external canal is normal, or if this is going to be normal, abnormal, whether there has be a swelling, or is there any kind of a kind of any discharge or a pus or a granulation tissue which is seen. So how do you differentiate whether it's going to be a osteoma or a sagging of the canal? You take a ear speculum, or you can take a probe and just gently touch the ear canal. You can see if it's going to be soft, then it must be a sagging of the external canal. If it is going to be hard, maybe think about an osteoma. Suppose it is tender, what does it mean? When I use a probe and it is tender, what does it mean? Any guess? It probably could be due to a furuncle. Okay? Yeah, correct. So once this is done, then we go into the important one. As you seen this picture, you have to talk everything about an tympanic membrane. As you know, tympanic membrane, you should see these structures, like you are supposed to see the handle malleus, cone of light, and the pearly gray eardrum. When any of these three things are not seen, that means there is some abnormality in the tympanic membrane. Go to the next one, please. So how do you divide the quadrants of the tympanic membrane? So it's an imaginary line drawn along the handle of malleus, I see in this picture, and one line which cuts across your umbo. So when you divide in these two, you have 4 quadrants. So one is the anterosuperior, antero-inferior, postero-superior, and postero-inferior. So anything which is mimicking or anything which is resembling that of your cone of light has to be antero-inferior, and above that is an antero-superior. Same way postero-superior or a postero-inferior. So again, this is a very important thing. They might ask you in your exams, how do you divide the quadrants? Your quadrants can be divided based on the vertical and horizontal line, or vertical line along the handle of malleus, and a horizontal line along the umbo. Umbo is nothing but the tip of your malleus. Okay, we'll go to the next one. So this is what I was talking about, the Siegel's pneumatic oral speculum, which we were thinking about doing a fistula test. So the other one, you have a doubt. Many people have a doubt whether the tympanic membrane, there's a perforation. Many of the students, they say, sir, I think there's a perforation there. So how do you know there's a perforation or there's no perforation? If it is obvious, you're not going to ask the doubt, or you're not going to ask this question. So in this case, we can also use a Siegel speculum or Valsalva maneuver. As you know, Valsalva maneuver is nothing but you're holding the nostril and closing your mouth and trying to blow the air. You can see the mobility of the tympanic membrane. Same way, Siegel's pneumatic speculum also can be used when you keep it inside the ear canal and inflate and deflate the bulb. You can see the mobility of the tympanic membrane. So when you see the mobility of the tympanic membrane, we always think that the perforation is there or not in mobility. In case it's mobile, is normal or abnormal? Any guess? I thought the answer will be coming so quickly. So in case there's a retracted or normal tympanic membrane, you can have the mobility of the tympanic membrane. If there's a perforation, you will not have a mobility of the tympanic membrane. So you have a doubt whether, yes, whether you have a doubt whether the tympanic membrane is intact or there's a perforated one, you can always do a Valsalva maneuver, or you can do a Siegel speculum, or as I said, you can use an otoscope with a bulb, try to inflate and deflate. So if you see the mobility of the tympanic membrane, that means there is just a retraction or the tympanic membrane is intact. So this is a test to check for the mobility of the eardrum. So once you have finished everything about the external auditory canal, then you are talking about the tympanic membrane. You are seeing for the handle of malleus, color of the tympanic membrane, which is pearly gray, and cone of light. Then you check for the mobility of the tympanic membrane. But if your perforation is there, you don't have to comment on this. When you have a suspicion, or if the examiner asks you, how do you know the tympanic membrane is perforated or not? You can always say, sir, I did a Siegalization and Valsalva. There was no mobility of tympanic membrane, so I think there's a perforation of tympanic membrane. Next one, please.
Siegel's pneumatic speculum. This is Siegel's pneumatic speculum. The uses of Siegel's pneumatic speculum are to perform the fistula test, to check the mobility of the tympanic membrane, and to spray medications over the tympanic membrane. The magnification the Siegel speculum gives is about 2 times.
So this is how it's nothing but a mirror on it, and then you can see the which is focused, and you inflate and deflate, and to see for the mobility. So nowadays, again, with the advent of this otoscope, we don't try to use this regularly, but for exam purposes, you should know what is the use of a Siegel speculum and when do you use a Siegel speculum. Let's go to the next one. So as I said, when you see for the tympanic membrane, once you have seen there's a mobile tympanic membrane, and you don't see any kind of mobility, the next thing which you like to see is the tympanic membrane congested or different in color. So when you have a congested tympanic membrane, naturally any kind of an acute infection, you will have a congested tympanic membrane. Other one, it can be a bullous meningitis or any kind of a barotrauma. Bluish in case of a hemotympanic. If there's a blood collection behind the tympanic membrane, particularly in a post-trauma patient, you can have a bluish tympanic membrane. And when you have a chalky white patches over it, it might be due to a tympanosclerosis. Tympanosclerosis is nothing but a hyaline deposition over the tympanic membrane because of the long-standing destruction or the disease, or sometimes when you have an otitis media with an effusion and you have a pus or collection and then it gets drained, you can have this kind of a white deposition. This is nothing but tympanosclerotic patches. So on looking at the tympanic membrane, whether the tympanic membrane is normal in color or is congested or bluish, or is there any patches called tympanosclerosis, this is what you're trying to say. Next one. The other one is, yes, whether the cone of light is seen in the anteroinferior quadrant or is it distorted. So when you have a distorted cone of light, that means your tympanic membrane is not in position. It might be due to some Eustachian tube dysfunction or retraction of tympanic membrane. You might be having an altered cone of light. When do you have an absence of cone of light? Any guess? You don't see a cone of light at all. When do you see that? When you, in what condition would you see that? In case of
Or Titus media.
in case not audit media, in case of there's a perforation. If you don't see a intact tympanic membrane, then you will not have a cone of light. Okay, you have an abnormal cone of light. It might be some pathology in the tympanic membrane. Either it is retracted or distorted. It might be atelectasis. All these things might be a distorted cone of light. Next one. So what are things you would like to see in a tympanic membrane? Particularly, we are trying to focus on the pars tensa. So either you're seeing for any retraction or tympanosclerotic patch or a perforation or a granulation tissue, these are things you would like to see commonly. Next one. So this is a retracted eardrum. You can see the whole eardrum is sucked inside and it is draped over. It looks like a perforation and it is sticking on to the the ossicles there. You can see the this part of thing is completely sticking on to the ossicles, that's the posterior part, and you can see a little bit of air bubbles here. So when you see an air bubbles, that means it could be due to a kind of a serous otitis media or a otitis media with effusion. That means there's some fluid. And this kind of a tympanic membrane is something called as a retracted tympanic membrane. So how do you know it's a retracted tympanic membrane? As I said, you don't see a beautiful cone of light. You can see the handle of Malleus is completely retracted, and you can also use a Siegel's pneumatic speculum, or as I said, you can use a otoscope and see for the checking for the mobility of the tympanic membrane. Next one. So what are the stages of retraction of tympanic membrane? You can also, you're supposed to know about, there's a classification called SAIDS classification. It's nothing but based on the retraction and sticking on to the incus, you call it as a SAIDS classification. And depends upon whether it's a grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 is when it's completely stuck and the whole TM is completely adherent with the structures that the ossicles, then you call as a stage 4, that is called as an adhesive otitis media. That means the whole tympanic membrane is stuck to the middle ear and you don't have a mobility. So it's almost adhesive, it is adherent to the middle ear. That is called as an adhesive otitis media. The classification is called SAIDS classification. Next one. So what are things you want to see in a tympanic membrane perforation? So whenever you're describing about a perforation, you always have to talk about the site of perforation, size of perforation, margins of the perforation. These are the things which you are supposed to tell. And sometimes if the perforation is big, you're supposed to comment on the structures which you see through the perforation. So definitely things which you any examiner would expect is what is the type of perforation, whether it's a central perforation or a marginal perforation, size of the perforation, small, big, medium, or subtotal, whatever, and whether it's a oval or a round or whatever, and margins, whether the margins are regular or irregular, and what you see through the perforation. Let's go to the next slide, please. So as I said, the most important thing, whether it's a central or a marginal. As you know, central perforation is a perforation which is seen in the pars tensa and it is surrounded by a normal tympanic membrane. This is a question which definitely everyone is going to ask you and is going to be your case. So what is the difference between a central and a marginal? If your tympanic annulus is involved, it is called as a marginal perforation. When your tympanic annulus is intact and a perforation in the pars tensa, it is always called as a central perforation. Okay, let's go to the next one. So these are the types of perforation. You should know when it is involving only one quadrant, you call as a small perforation. Moderate, large, subtotal, and all these things is depending upon the number of quadrants. When you have a more than 2 quadrant, then you call as a large perforation. When it involves all 4 quadrants, just leaving the tympanic annulus, that means it is a subtotal perforation. And here, if you see there's a perforation in the margin where the tympanic annulus is destroyed, then it is called as a marginal perforation. So any marginal perforation is unsafe because there's a destruction happening, and rest of the perforation you always call as a central perforation. Next one. So when you say it's a regular margin, when it's always a disease due to CSOM, you will always have a regular margins. So when do you have an irregular margins? Irregular margins are always seen in case of a traumatic perforation. Somebody slaps you. You will not have a nice, beautiful, small perforation. You will have a irregular or a ragged edges. Okay. And then, as I said, if the perforation is big enough, they might ask you, what are the structures which you see through the perforation? So through the perforation, depending on the quadrant. If the perforation is posteriorly, you might be able to see the round window, you might be able to see the stapes, incus, and all these things. So based on the perforation side, suppose as an anterior quadrant perforation, you should be able to see the E-station tube is a big perforation, and particularly in the posterior quadrant, then you are supposed to comment on the round window and the ossicular chain. Next one, please. So these are things which you are trying to see. Is there any multiple perforations or regular margins or irregular margins? So if you see in this case, you have a kind of not a smooth margin. So probably thinking about could be a traumatic perforation. If you have a smooth like this, then you could think about a CSOM. If you have multiple perforation, you might have media. So when you have multiple perforation, is always due to tuberculosis otitis media. Any guess why there's a multiple perforation in the tuberculosis otitis media? Any guess? Let's go to the next slide, please. So multiple perforation is seen in tuberculosis otitis media in this condition because the tuberculosis bacilli settles down in multiple places. So in each places there is a necrosis happening and causing a multiple perforation. So in case they ask you why there's a multiple perforation tuberculosis, the bacilli settles down in multiple areas causing necrosis. Then you have the attic perforation or attic retraction. So whatever so far we talked about is the pars tensa. But here if you see a perforation in the upper part, that is in the pars flaccida, you always think about a cholesteatoma as a disease or maybe a marginal perforation. So any problems in the pars tensa is always called as an unsafe year. Any problem in the pars tensa is called as a safe year. So what are, in case they ask you what is the difference between a safe year and unsafe year? Any disease which is confined to the pars tensa is a safe year. Any disease which is confined to the pars flaccida, you call as an unsafe year. Commonest pathology could be due to cholesteatoma. I'm not going to do cholesteatoma or anything right now. Let's go to the next one. Okay, you can see a bit of a granulation tissue and polyps in this slide. So what you're trying to look in cholesteatoma or attic perforation, you commonly see is because of the destruction of the bone. You can always have a granulation or you can have a polypoid tissue formation. So that is why they ask you, what is the basic difference between a unsafe year and a safe year? Unsafe year, you can see the disease is confined to the pars flaccida and there can be bleeding or there can be a purulent discharge. Why there's a bleeding? Because of the granulation tissue or a tissue formation. Purulent discharge because of the active bone destruction or the infection. Okay. And granulation tissue is polyps are always pale edematous and doesn't bleed, whereas a granulation tissue you can always having a bleeding on touch. Next one, please. This is nothing but a tympanosclerotic picture where you can see a night chalky white deposits. As I said, it might be due to the hyalinization or maybe a post serous otitis media where there can be a drying of all the fluid and later on it deposits over the tympanic membrane, which shows a chalky white deposit. If you see like this, then you always have to think about tympanosclerotic patch. Next one. So this is an examination of using an otoscope.
While examining the right ear, use your right hand. The little finger has to rest over the zygoma so that your movement is restricted and you do not injure the patient. Switch on the otoscope Pull the earlobe back, pinna back. Keep your finger over the zygoma. Slowly advance the otoscope. Keep it in front of the external canal.
Yeah, next one.
This is examination of your tympanic membrane with the otoscope. You will be able to see all the 4 quadrants. Move your otoscope right, left, up and around to check all the 4 quadrants.
Next slide, please.
The otoscope.
So once we have finished everything about examination, so we have finished examining the external part and deeper part and the tympanic membrane part. The next thing is coming to the 3 important tests. That's your tuning fork test, test for facial nerve, and test for giddiness. Any doubts so far? Is it boring? Can we stop here, or you want to continue for another 15 minutes?
Guys, anyone have any doubts so far?
Anything was confusing, you can ask me. Or if you're okay, we'll just touch upon the 3 tests and then we'll wind up. Maybe another 10 minutes maximum. I know you guys are getting bored also.
Sir, I had a doubt.
Yeah.
Sir, when we look for nystagmus in the fistula test, is it usually immediate onset or is there a lag or something?
No, it will come immediately because you are immediately stimulating. No?
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So you want to go for the test later on, or you want to wind up the session? It's now about, I think it's about 45 minutes class is done. So you want to have this another day, or you want to finish off today?
So it actually was it was scheduled for 2 days, sir. Actually,
2 days.
No, sir. Today for
Today.
today. The one. Yes.
Let me touch and finish it off so that another 10 minutes. And you have doubts, then probably we can clarify on another day, or put it in the group so that I can have another 10-minute session on another day to just to clarify your doubts. Is that okay?
Sure, sir. We'll look into it. No
Because
problem.
normally I take for anybody to listen is maximum 45 minutes. After
Sure,
that, you'll be yawning or irritable.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let us go to the tuning fork test. So normally, as you guys know, that you have 3 tuning forks. The most important tuning fork test is going to be Rennie's test, Weber's test, and ABC. Next one. And we use various frequencies. Use 512, 256, and 128. The commonest one is 512 because it lies in the speech frequency. And you have a stem, prongs, and a base. So these are the parts of the tuning forks. And rest of the tuning forks are used to quantify your deafness, and it is also useful to see for any kind of vibration. Okay, but the commonest one is 512 because it lies in your speech frequency, that is between 500 to 2000. Next one. Next one. I think there's a demo video. How do you do a Rennie's test? Let's listen to this.
We are going to perform Rennie's test. The patient has to explain what we are going to do. I'm using a 512 Hz tuning fork, which is in the speech frequency. Strike the tuning fork and place it in the mastoid prominence. Then once the sound stops, place it in the front of the ear. The patient is able to appreciate the sound in front of the ear. That means air conduction is better than bone conduction. Let's see how the video is. I'm going to strike the tuning fork and place it in the ear. When it stops, please raise your hand. You're able to hear it. Okay.
Next one.
This test is Rennie's positive. That means air conduction is better than bone conduction. The patient's hearing is intact.
Next slide. Next slide. Keep moving. Next slide. Yeah. So for the first test, what we expect from a Rennie's test. If the patient is having a perforation, you always have to say Rennie's negative. Okay, that's what is the basic thing. I'm not going to the depth and confusing right now. I know at the end of 45, you might be having plenty of confusion. So what you do is Rennie's test, Weber's test, and ABC. So Rinne's test tells you whether Rinne is positive or negative. If you have a perforation, you will always have a Rinne negative. Coming to the next one is the Weber's test. I think the video must be there.
Weber's test is done by striking the tuning fork and place it in the midline. I am placing the tuning fork over the glabella. Ask the patient which side he hears the sound. Which side do you hear the sound? Both sides. Okay. Normally, Weber is heard in both the sides equally. In one side, if it's lateralized, either it's due to a conductive hearing loss in the affected side, and in the sensorineural hearing loss to the normal side.
Okay, next slide, please.
Weber's test normally.
Okay, so in Weber test, what we try to do is the same thing. So you see whether it is on the right side or left side. Always it will be lateralized to the worst ear. Okay. Suppose you have bilateral perforation. What happens then? Any guess? So in a bilateral perforation, it will always be lateralized to the worst ear. So that means you have a big perforation on the right ear and a small perforation on the left ear. Your Weber will be lateralizing to the right side. That's how you take it. Okay. The last test is nothing but an absolute bone conduction test. It's called ABC. This is the test which is done only for sensory neural hearing loss. It is not for conductive deafness. So Rinne's test can say the negative means it's a conductive deafness. Weber lateralized to right side. If there's a perforated ear, means it's a conductive deafness. But ABC is a test to show only for a sensory neural hearing loss. Let us play the video for this.
Absolute bone conduction is done by striking the tuning fork and placed in the mastoid prominence. Ask the patient to lift the hand once the sound stops. Immediately, the examiner has to close his ear and keep it behind his ear canal over the mastoid prominence. If the examiner is able to hear the sound, that means the patient has sensorineural hearing loss. If both of them does not hear the sound, it means the patient hearing is normal.
Okay. So you got it. I think it's simple. So next slide. So in ABC test, so this is how we interpretation. Okay. So if you take it as a normal, both are equal, and it is not lateralized. In case of Weber's test, and ABC will be same or not reduced. So if it's going to be a conductive deafness, Rinne negative, Weber lateralized to the worst ear, and for the examiner, nothing much of a difference or not reduced. In a sensorineural deafness, it can be lateralized to the better ear. So Weber will be lateralized to a better ear in a sensorineural deafness, and you will have a reduced ABC. So don't say the word negative or positive when it comes to ABC. It has to be reduced or not reduced. Reduced means there is a sensorineural component loss. Not reduced means it is normal. Next one. I mean, I'm just skipping off this test right now. Bing's test and Gillies test, I'm not talking about this right now. Let's skip on all these things. And the next one is your facial nerve function. So for any ear case, you definitely have to do a facial nerve test. It's simple. You just have to close your mouth and ask them to, blow it up, or you just have to close your eyes and see for any kind of upward or outward movement of the eyeball, or clenching the teeth to see for the motor and the sensory function. So what are the sensory functions? You might have to check for the lacrimal gland or sensation over the face. But again, for an undergraduate examination, all you just have to know is that you definitely have to see for the facial nerve function and see whether the facial nerve function is normal. Next one.
Round the forehead, close the eyes tightly, blow your cheeks, say E, clench your teeth. Stop.
Okay, that's simple. It's hardly less than a minute. This is again a part of a routine facial nerve exam, because next slide, because most of the times you might have an abnormalities of the facial nerve when you're talking about mastoid abscess or mastoid infection. You might have an infection in the facial nerve, which is going to be in part of your middle ear or your stylomastoid foramen. You can have all these things. So coming to the last one, it's a test for giddiness. So as you know, the ear has got two functions. One is for hearing and the other one is for balance. So you're checking for the vestibular function. By simple thing, you are checking for the nystagmus, and fistula test we've already seen, and cerebellar function to see whether it's going to be a central cause or a peripheral cause. And the last one is the positional test to see whether it is a peripheral giddiness. Next one. So nystagmus, which can be horizontal or vertical or rotatory. So what kind of a nystagmus are we seeing? Most of the times we would see, if it is going to be ear, you will have always having a horizontal giddiness. I mean horizontal nystagmus. The other one may be some kind of a central cause. I'm not going to the depth about the central cause. If you think there's a nystagmus horizontal, you always have to think about it could be due to a pathology or a problem in the ear. So otherwise called as a peripheral lesion. Next one. Again, I'm not going to the depth of or the degree of nystagmus and all these things. We'll just skip off all these things. As in completion, you should also know whether it is going to be a central or a peripheral lesions. As I said, peripheral means anything to do with the ear. Central means you have the cerebellar part for the giddiness. Next one. The last one is you want to know whether it's going to be a central or peripheral. You can also do a Dix-Hallpix maneuver. So Dix-Hallpix maneuver is nothing but you put the position, lying position of the patient, and then move the head to the right and left and to see for nystagmus. If there's a nystagmus, then you always think about it could be due to peripheral cause. Commonly, it is a test done for a BPPV. BPV is nothing but a benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. I mean, for an undergraduate level, we just stop with looking at the nystagmus, and in case of facial nerve, whether facial nerve is intact or any abnormalities, and tuning fork tests are compulsory. So for an MBBS in the university exams, when you're completing your year case, after finishing your tympanic membrane and everything, you will talk about tuning fork tests and then test whether the facial nerve is intact or any abnormalities. And you can also say, I didn't see any kind of nystagmus, and finish your examination. And most of the times when you talk about fistula test itself, during examination of the ear canal, that itself tells you about your test for vestibular function. So Dix-Hallpix and all these things is probably more of theoretical. You should know, or in the examination, they might ask you, how do you check for giddiness or nystagmus, which we already talked about in case of a fistula test and all these things. But I mean, as a completion sake, I'm putting it all on these things. So tuning fork test is 100% compulsory. Facial nerve test, yes, you comment on facial nerve test, and test for cerebellar function to say whether it's a peripheral or a central cause. It is not required for undergraduate, but you should definitely know as in completion sake. Next one. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I'm on time 1 hour. So any doubts or any other clarifications you would like to ask me?
Guys, so we're end of the session, towards the end of the session. So anyone have any doubts, please feel free to ask. So sir might help us clear it out.
Basically, in this year examination, the most important part you always guys, university examination is definitely examination of the tympanic membrane. Just to re-emphasize on the examination of tympanic membrane, all you have to comment on the annulus malleus, cone of light, and color of the tympanic membrane. And mostly for an MBBS level, they would be giving a central perforation. So you have to talk about the site of perforation, size of perforation, edges of the perforation, and what you see through the perforation. So these are things 100% you're not going to miss. And then your tuning fork test, Rennie's test, Weber's test, and ABC. Which tuning fork you prefer is 512, particularly for the speech frequency. I mean, these are 100% must. You can't escape without knowing these things about your tympanic membrane and tuning fork test. Without knowing this, you can't escape from an examination of the ear. Looks like you guys are all exhausted, and you guys don't have any more doubts or any other doubts. or if you are kind of tired, then probably put in your doubts or something. We will clarify you if you guys are exhausted.
Sir,
Yeah,
what case do we generally get in the university exam?
100% we will be giving only CSOM safe year. Okay. So CSM safe year means CSOM with the central perforation.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, sir, I believe there's no any more doubts. So I think we, we can end it up.
If there's no doubts, there are two options. Either they didn't understand anything or absolutely clear.
No, sir, it was a really good session, sir. You did a really wonderful set. So first of all, thank you so much for coming for this. Sir.
Thank
After
you.
our
Thank you.
it is something which we're doing extra, so you have accepted our invitation for this, and we are really grateful for this. Sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. All the best. So I think hopefully, if you just brush up these things, you have doubts, you put it in the group so that we can clarify. And all the best for you guys for your further learning and teaching program, and maybe an extended teaching program was there, and do well in your future. Thank you,
Uh,
man. Thank you, guys.
sure, sure, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Guys, one more, just before you guys log out, we'll be sending a feedback form pretty soon now. So we request you all to fill it up, and hope you guys had a really good time and gain some knowledge in examination of year, which is really, as sir said, it's really one of the most important concept which, as a medical student as well as for knowledge purpose, as a
Not more
medical.
important as you said, it is a more difficult thing to see because here most of the time is very difficult to see unless you have this orientation or you repeatedly see it is going to be very difficult.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So yes, sir. As sir said, yes, sir. So thank you so much, sir, for coming for this
Bye bye.
event. So thank you so much. And guys, and we would like to also have a special mention here to Aldi and Lekana for helping us out with this PPT, for editing it out. So thank you so much, guys. So, and also you can also join our team of volunteers. So you can also check out our Instagram page for the link to join the team of volunteers to for a greater cause. So thank you all so much. You all been a lovely audience, and thank you all so much for joining. And we'll be sharing the feedback form in the WhatsApp group since we have some technical issues in preparing the form. So thank you all so much. And once again, sir, thank you so much. Anything else you would like to add, sir?
Nothing, man. Thank you. Feedback from your side only is going to give us ideas about what your expectation is. Maybe
Sure, sir.
whether it's slow or fast or something, or we can have it as a two session or something. It's again your feedback from the rest of the people. Otherwise, thank you, I mean, for being a part of it. Okay.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much.
Right.
Looks like we have the feedback form ready, and we have posted in the Google Meet chat. So, guys, we all request you to kindly fill it up so that we will get a feedback from you. So, like as of how we can improve, or also how we can, you can also put forward your own ideas. How we can make it more interesting, other than this. So, yeah. So, thank you, as sir said. So, thank you so much, sir, once again, and thank you all for
Yeah,
joining
yeah.
us.
All the best, guys. Do well. Bye bye.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Guys, we'll be staying in the line for a few more minutes, and you guys can fill up the form. So we'll be logging out exactly after
Let
five
me at
minutes.
least escape.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. You can leave,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Have a good day.